ladies and gentlemen. This is Podcast for Life. And I'm sorry we're having technical difficulties, so we're going to do this without playing the score, without playing the music. But ladies and gentlemen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me see if I can try that again and see if we can do a little bit better. We were loading into Castbox. So wherever you listen to this, and we may be in other places that I don't know, but such as it is, I thank you for listening. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Lessig. This is Podcast for Life. Okay, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going by the... Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. This is Podcast for Life. My name is Daniel Lessig. I would like to start off by giving a few shout outs, if I could, to some people that are supporting my podcast. We have, I had this up. What'd I do with it? Okay. I don't know. Okay. Well, we'll do that next week. But I remember there was Tammy, Robert, and Bill that have sent in some donations and supported our podcast, and I thank y'all for that. Let me encourage the rest of you to help support my podcast, and we can keep it commercial free. This is Podcast for Life. My name is Daniel Essig, and what we're going to do today to remote. Let me give you a little bit of background here. The Battle of the Alamo was the beginning of the War of Independence for Texas from Mexico. It lasted 13 days from February 23rd, 1936, and a group of Texan volunteer soldiers occupied the Alamo near San Antonio. February 23rd, the Mexicans began on the fort. And even though they were vastly outnumbered, Santa Anna's forces numbering in the thousands, and Texas troops numbering about 200 defenders, led by James Bowie and William Travis, they held out for 13 days before they were overpowered. For Texas, the Battle of the Alamo became the enduring symbol of their historic resistance to oppression and their struggle for independence. The battle cry of Remember the Alamo was popular during the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. Now, with that, what we're looking at is we're looking at ways to remember the Alamo. And one of the treasures, American treasures under threat, is the cenotaph. And that is the marker for the Alamo. And what a cenotaph is basically an empty tomb. And what it does is it holds all of the emotion for the battles and all of the pride that went into our refusal to surrender. Okay. Now, sorry, those of you that have listened for a while know that every once in a while I do get lost. I do get some things on my computer that need to be taken care of. Who I have on the line right now is Rick Range, and he's going to explain a little bit better about what we're after. And Rick, are you there? Hello, Rick. Okay, so we're having more technical difficulties. What is going on? Give me one moment, please. It seems like we lost Rick. Let me try again here. Hmm. Okay, one moment. Cellular network not available for voice calls. I don't understand that. I should be on the Wi-Fi anyway. Uh, okay, one moment. Let me see if I can figure this out. Go to settings and make sure Wi-Fi is turned on. Okay, Wi-Fi calling is turning on. And I don't understand what's going on. This is the first time that this has happened. There we go. Okay. Now, let me try this now. See if this will work. Hopefully, with a little bit of luck, it will.
Hello.
Hello, Rick.
Yes, sir. I think I lost you.
Yeah, I believe you did too. For some reason, I lost service, so I'll figure that out later. But at least we got you on the line, and I've already done the introduction and everything. So, the question everybody's dying to know is, what is the issue with the cenotaph?
Well, it's now safe. The planners, especially the San Antonio branch advisory committee and the Alamo Trust, which is another entity down there running the Alamo new plan, had wanted to move it off of the battlefield 500 feet south, and which would be totally outside the perimeter of the Alamo Fort and Mission. And they had been trying to do this ever since the beginning 6 years ago. And we had been fighting it, and we finally, they had to get a permit from the Texas Historical Commission if they were going to move it, because it's a state designated historical marker put up in 1936 as part of the Texas Centennial. And to move any of those officially designated markers, you have to have a permit from the Texas Historical Commission. And it got finally brought to them. The city council had passed it, and then it had to go before another committee. And then finally, in December last, they sent a request in for the permit, and the Texas Historical Commission put it off until June, and then all the COVID stuff hit. And finally, they had a meeting last Tuesday, a week ago, to September 22nd. It was done over the phone and by Zoom and so forth. And it went on for about 10-hour meeting, and fortunately, we got the lieutenant governor to take a position on this, and he got up and spoke for nearly 20 minutes at the very first, and then they had people calling in all day, I guess probably 120 testifying citizens, some from the state legislature and so forth. And they also had a public vote put up. They had gotten so many emails and stuff about 6 days prior. They put this up where you could either log in to register to speak, or you could vote yes or no. And so we were trying to get the word out on that, and on short notice, but we did end up getting the vote. At the end of the day, they announced that the people in favor of moving it were 1,625. The no's were 29,003. So it was almost a 95% vote against. So that helped a lot. So then they finally took the historical commission vote, and it ended up 12 against, 2 in favor, and 1 abstaining. So we decisively defeated that, and as I say, that's been an issue they've been pushing from day one for 6 years now, and that put the nail in the coffin on that issue, because without that permit, they cannot move it whatsoever. So that's what's been going on, and that was the latest result on that.
Okay, so it sounds like we're being successful in saving at least one American treasure, one American landmark, and that's good to know. Okay, so basically, as far as it goes, the cenotaph is going to be staying where it's at. Remembrance of the Alamo is secure. Okay, now getting back to the original Battle of the Alamo, were there any survivors of the battle?
There were some civilian survivors. Of course, Susanna Dickinson being the most famous, she and her baby. There were also some of the local Tejano Mexican families from San Antonio there that had taken refuge in the Alamo, and like the Esparza family, the Lozoya family, both of their husbands were killed in the battle. But they were there along with several kids. There were a couple of other ladies. Those were all in the sacristy, which is that room right off the main part of the church there. It actually had served as the church that's never finished, and a lot of people know this, but at the time of the battle, it didn't have a roof over the main part of the church. So they'd been holding mass in the sacristy room, which is just adjacent, and that's where most of the civilians were holed up, as well as their about 90 bushels of corn that they'd managed to get in there right before the siege began, and 20 to 30 head of beeves were outside in the old weaving room area up north, the courtyard up there. They called it later they called it the cow pen, but that's what they basically ate on, was corn and beef. And then they were over on the west wall, one of the rooms over there, Jim Bowie's in-laws, a couple of ladies from the Garamendi family, were staying over there, so they survived. And of course, Travis had a personal servant, black slave named Joe, who actually participated in the battle. And once Travis was shot there at the very get-go, he'd run up to the north wall and leaned over and fired his double-barrel shotgun, and he got a bullet right in the head. May have been a pistol or a buckshot. It was a small caliber. Anyway, he went down, and so Joe went back to the headquarters room, and of course, after the Mexicans got in, they came down, and he came out. They said, "Are there any Negroes here?" And he said, "Yeah, there's one." And of course, they were not. Santa Anna had given orders none of those people were to be killed. Mm-hmm. And so he came out, and Mexican soldier, they were going so crazy in the melee, he almost got killed. He got stabbed with a bayonet in one side, and then the opposite side, he took a piece of buckshot. But this Mexican captain, who was part of the local Presidio force, he jumped in, and he was actually the brother-in-law of one of these two ladies I was talking about. But he kept Joe from getting killed. There was, we now know a black lady who had come in as the common law wife of one of the defenders, and now we believe she was actually helping man one of the cannons, and that she was one the Mexican reports talk about was shot down running between or near a cannon. There was an account of that, and it looks like now we know who she was, and she was actually participating in the battle. There was one Mexican soldier who had deserted named Brigado Guerrero, and he had come over and he was fighting with the Texans, and he was back in that room that I mentioned, the sacristy, and there at the end, he was able to tell them that, no, I was captured by the Texans, held here against my will, and they didn't know he had participated in anything. So miraculously, he managed to survive. So there were several, probably 30, 35 in total. There was one guy that got away, was severely wounded, made it all the way down to Port Lavaca, about 125 miles away to the coast, but he was wounded and he died. Of course, the Alamo fell March 6th, and he died 3 months later in early June. And he may have been one of the, supposedly they put out 3 lookouts the night before because they knew the attack was imminent. It was clear. And he could have been one of those 3. Of course, we don't know what happened to any of those. They may have they were so exhausted, no sleep for 12 days really, and they may have got snuck up on and killed, just bayoneted. But he might have been one of those 3 because later he had a nephew. A lot of these families had filed with the state for land grants due to their service, and one of the nephews in his statement that something about this Dicker man being one of the scouts or lookouts. So that might have been how he got away. He may have he was dead and they attacked the Alamo, and he got away. Could have been one of the garrison inside that managed to get out. We just don't know, but it does look like he get away and died later. There was another account that was really intriguing about 2 guys a few weeks after the Alamo into Nacogdoches and badly wounded, and they claimed in the battle or whether they were part of this reinforcement force that tried to get into the Alamo at the last minute. It's just unknown because they left Nacogdoches, I saw, and just finished on the face of the earth. We don't know what happened to them, what their names were, or anything. But that's pretty much an accounting of there were quite a few survivors, and a couple of them were actually defenders that the Mexicans didn't know it, so they survived.
Okay. Alrighty. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Rick or me, here's what we can do is, if you're on Get Vocal, you'll see 3 squares underneath my picture. It says grab this spot. You can just grab one of those spots and then we'll have you on the air. Or you can type into the chat box your question. If you're on Patreon or YouTube, the best way to do it would be to email me at daniel.essek, ESSEK, @outlook.com. And if you're watching us on Facebook, just go to where it says send message, and I should be able to get your message. And that way there, you'll be able to ask your questions as well. Okay, Rick, while we're waiting for that, what are the plans for the future for the Alamo recreational area?
Well, it's kind of in limbo right now because when this plan was passed back in 2014 to renovate and try to put the church back in proper repair, there's some deterioration going on with the church and the long barracks, the only 2 surviving structures. But part of the bill was also to put the battle, put it back as close as you could today in the features time of the battle. Well, it ended up being a co-partnership between the General Land Office Commissioner George P. Bush and the mayor of San Antonio. And it got very convoluted and complex. George Bush created all these 501c3s. One of them was the Alamo Trust, the Alamo Management Committee. There was a private fundraising board, just agency atop agency, and would not divulge where any of the money was going. He said he didn't have to because they were 501c3s. So that's been a big problem. And then the city has tried to first say they wanted to focus off of the battle, even though that's why people come from all over the world to see the place. They wanted more of a multicultural, full 10,000-year history of the site, etc. And so that's been a big bone of contention, and that's why they wanted the cenotaph out there so bad, because it's specifically dedicated to the defenders. It's got big marble sculptures of Crockett, Bowie, Travis, Bonham, all the names that were known at the time engraved on the marker. So it's kind of makes the battle front and center, and that's why they wanted it out of there so bad. Well, now that that's been stopped, the city agencies at least are saying, well, what they had done, they own the plaza. The state owns the church, the law barracks. They have now bought the buildings across the street over there where the west wall would have been, where the headquarters was. But the plaza in the middle, the Mission Plaza, is actually owned by the city. Well, at one point for this plan, they finally agreed to do a 50-year lease of the plaza to the state of Texas, but now claiming that was one of the provisions of that was moving the Alamo cenotaph out, and now they're looking into legal options about voiding the lease, which they may end up doing. So that's all up in the air. They had wasted a couple of years beginning. Originally, they wanted to put glass walls up all around the place, make it look like a giant fishbowl. One of these modernist things, and of course there was a big outcry about that, and finally one of the top donors down there went to Bush and told him to get rid of the glass walls, so that was gone. Then they got on this thing about moving the cenotaph, and everything had to wait for that, so there's been no progress but very little progress. They have done a little bit of repair to the church, law barracks, a little bit of archaeology. Nothing at all in the new museum, which was going to be a major element of this. They don't even have the plans on paper, don't even know for certain where it's going to go yet, and which more modern buildings are going to be removed, which ones are going to stay. They just left all that hanging because they've just been obsessed with that cenotaph and removing it for 6 years. So now it's, like I said, they're looking into legal options of getting out of the lease. They're saying they're going to have to go back to square one and have all these hearings and meetings. It's kind of up in the air, because you're dealing with the city, which has got some real radical people on it, including the mayor. Mm-hmm. And plus George P. Bush at the land office. So you got all these layers upon layers involved. And really at this point, I don't think it will stop. They were claiming, one of the most radical ones was saying, well, if we don't get this cenotaph vote permit approved, then the whole plan is dead. And I don't believe that'll happen, because the legislature's already appropriated over $100 million. The city's kicked in another 38, so it's a multi-million-dollar project. And they keep saying it's going to run $400 to $450 billion. So there's too much money involved for them just to drop this. I don't think it will happen. But it's as far as time, with the way things have gone in the past, the only solution I see is, and the lieutenant governor, he got on board with this. In fact, I said he testified for 20 minutes down there, and he said it needs to be about the battle.
Oops.
2 million people come every year or thereabouts. So from all over the world. So he wants to have a plan that it'll have in the museum the full story of the site and so forth. But the physical outside part itself would be reclaiming as much as the 1836 condition as you can at this point. And that's what he wants. And he's even said that the legislature would fund it. They wouldn't have to worry about raising this other 200 million plus from the private sector if the right plan is implemented. So I believe that the legislature, they meet again in January. They only meet every other year here in Texas, but they're going to be meeting. And if he can get a plan adopted like he's talking about, that would actually satisfy everybody. The public, the vast majority, they want the battle. Some of us folks in San Antonio want more of this cultural history, but that could all be incorporated in the museum. So if they can get a good plan together and the state legislatures take it over and pay for it, then I think that's the only way this will ever happen. Because if it stays like it is, with all these multiple entities involved and conflict and interests and fight after fight after fight, I think we'll be another 6 years and won't be any further down the road than we are right now.
Okay, Rick. What is the present condition of the mission and the battlefield?
Well, the battlefield, of course, has been encroached over decades, ever since 1836. In fact, if Senator Driscoll hadn't stepped in 1905, it would have been long gone. It would have been a hotel or a parking lot. So she managed to save that and the long barracks. But all around, you've got on the north end, big federal post office that's been there since the 1880s. Which would make a great place for that museum if you could get the feds on board with it. On the west side, there's several structures over there, pretty well encroached on all four sides, which is part of the problem. However, there are avenues where a lot of the south wall, the main gate area, could be rebuilt. They're going to close those two streets that run through there, Alamo and Houston streets. That could be rebuilt. There's a couple of buildings on the west side that could be removed, and if they did, that would open up the space where Travis's headquarters was located. That could be rebuilt in the period accurate style. And a lot of the west wall over there, the north wall is pretty much covered with the post office, and then the northwest corner of it is covered by the what was the Indigo Hotel. I think they've reverted back to the old name, the Gibbs Hotel. Originally, that was the Gibbs building, and that was Sam Maverick's land. He had bought that right after the war, built his homestead there on that corner, and that's where all these cannon barrels, by the way, were dug up. They were digging for put a fence in 1852 and found 13 cannon barrels, 9 of them iron, 4 bronze, and then later in 1889, a few feet over, they were building an office building and found another cache of the 5 largest guns. They were over in a separate hole there, so that's where it came from, which has now been, that is one good thing that is, they've got an artillery committee. I've got 3 friends on that board, and they're taking those barrels that are authentic, and we through years and years of research, we figured out what barrels were there, what are missing, which guns were in which position, which caliber. Now we even know what kind of mount they were on. Some of them were actually on those Coretta ox carts. Believe it or not, there was another one, the famous Come and Take It cannon from Gonzales. It was on the 2 front wheels and axle of a cotton wagon. They had rigged that up and brought it over here. And today it's the bell hanging at St. Mark's Episcopal Church. His wife, we know, had that one melted down after he died in 1870. And the date on the bell was 1874, and it hangs still today in St. Mark's Episcopal, a couple of blocks north of the Alamo there on Travis Street. but very few people know that. But that's almost certainly the famous cannon that started the whole war. You know, when the Mexicans went over there and demanded it back, and they said no, come and take it, and that was the start of the Texas Revolution. So that gun is now hanging as a bell over there. But what they're going to do is, at least on some of the barrels, they're going to refabricate them. They've already done a couple in a foundry up in Idaho. They just came in last week, and they're going to remount them on the correct carriage, place them where they originally would have been placed or near to it, especially down on the south wall and the main gate. I'm arguing to them that if they're going to do it, they might as well go ahead and do the whole 18. We know there were 18 that were used and mounted during the battle, and I'd like to see them do all of them. That was really a focus of my interest and why I got on working on it. We've been working on, I guess, 17 years now, and things have intervened, but that's what got me involved in all of this. And largely it was a book about the Alamo artillery. And so we, over the years, did several expeditions and got some of the guns were already at the Alamo. The Maverick family had donated over the years. Some of them were in other locales. There was one that stood in a front yard of a mansion up there in the suburbs of Philadelphia for 100 years. That we think Maverick sent up there. We know there were some connections to that family. They were named French. Well, anyway, that barrel ended up coming back here in the 80s for an auction, and it ended up, it just took about a year of tracing, and I finally found the barrel, but it was up here in the town. Anybody knows where Denton, Texas is, University of North Texas there. It was just 10 miles west of Denton out there in a workshop in a farm. And so we were able to, the man who purchased it, deceased, but we were able to persuade the family to donate it. He'd always wanted to go to the Alamo. So we went up, got it, hauled it to Texas A&M where they have a big conservation lab out there on the old airfield. And they do conservation work of these barrels from all over the United States. So it was there for about 3 years. And then we finally, in 2010, got it into the Alamo Church. If you go inside, the first room on your left there, that was the baptistry, and that's where it was sitting along with a nice plaque that the family wanted to always accompany it. Now, that's all since been moved because ever since George B. Bush got in office, they've gone in there and they've stripped basically everything out. There used to be a flag for each state, a flag for each country that had a defender. There were memorial services held there every year by both the Daughters of the Republic of Texas and the Alamo Defenders Descendants Association, who are the actual lineal descendants. And they had really some really good services in there. But that's all been stripped out. What artifacts were in there, the flags, you go in there now, it's just bare walls. It looks like an old warehouse. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the things that have been going on in over the last half a dozen years. But they do have that one good project going with the cannons and the barrels, and I'm just hoping we can get that expanded to cover the entire artillery contingent.
Okay. Now here in Barberville, Kentucky, we celebrate Daniel Boone Days, and what we have is we have a group of people that reenact some of his exploits and bring remembrance to the way of life back then. And up in Gettysburg, I believe they do it once a month where they have a battle reenactment. Is there anything similar to that going on at the Alamo at present?
Any you mean reenactments?
Yes, sir.
Or
reenactment or character storytelling?
Yes, there were and still are some guided tours. Of course, now that the the Daughters of Texas used to run the DRT in 1905 until 2011. George P. Bush, when he got elected, he kicked them out, and his office took over the running that. So things have changed. They do have some tour guides and so forth. There used to be, and it's diminished somewhat, but they used to have reenactors on site, especially around the week of March 6th when it fell. And they would have little tents set up back there in the back courtyard. People that have been there know about where that garden, botanical garden is to the rear of the Alamo. They would have a reenactment camp set up back there. They also always did a dawn ceremony on March the 6th at the time the Alamo fell, about 6 in the morning. And they also had some reenactments in the days leading up to that. In fact, they used to have some cannon on each end of the street there, and they would just be booming, and it was really good. They quit letting them do that because they claimed the vibration was hurting the church or damaging the church. So that's pretty much gone. They did this dawn ceremony where both sides would have reenactors there. They would have a contingent, a battalion of Mexican soldiers in proper uniform with the brown vest English muskets that they carried, and then you'd have Texans and Tennesseans and all the Texian force represented with long rifles, and they would each fire salute. They would have a bagpiper play. They would have a trumpet player play taps or a bugler. They had a poem that they would recite in honor of the defenders, and it was in English. In fact, it was in English and in Spanish. And it was a really moving ceremony, very impressive. And by the time it was over, the sun would just barely be coming up. And I didn't go this year, intervening problems, but my understanding is I don't know if they even had the dawn ceremony this year at all. I know that in the last couple of years, it got cut back. I think they had to move down the street for that. Actually, instead of doing it at the Alamo, they did the firing down a block further south, down Menger Hotel, down that area. Because, again, they claimed that the musket or rifle fire would be, contributing to the deterioration of the church, which, I don't buy that. Yeah, those big booming cannon might have had a little bit of effect, but I don't think those small arms would have. But that's unfortunately gotten moved, and like I say, this year I don't even know if it happened at all. So a lot of the things that went down there that were really fun and impressive are just now gone due to George P. Bush.
Okay. Now, during my research, that was another name that came up, and I do have some questions about that. Who exactly is George P. Bush?
He is the Texas General Land Office Commissioner. That was an entity originally set up to handle all the Texas public lands, and of course they use the oil money off of those lands. That goes to funding of public education in the state of Texas. So that was the original purpose of that agency being set up. Now, since that time, they've taken over some other duties. And back in when Jerry Patterson was still commissioner before Bush, he was called by governor. And right down the road, and he called him and asked him if he wanted the Alamo. And he said, well, yeah, I'll take it. And they had gotten into some problems with the Daughters of the Republic that were running the place. There were some bookkeeping, money questions, There was a problem of them not keeping the roof from leaking. They didn't, some things like that, and it finally just came to a head. It had been simmering for years, and so Rick Perry finally replaced them, and he's the one that placed it under the General Land Office Commission and Commissioner. And like I say, about the time that happened, Patterson was in there for about a year, and during his tenure, he's the one that had the famous Travis letter transported from Austin out of the vault up there, where it would actually be seen by the public inside the Alamo. The first time that letter had ever been back since it was sent out by Travis the first day of the siege. So that was a really great thing. There was, I forget how many million people came to see that. So while he was in there, he really did a good job. And if he'd stayed, I think this new Alamo plan would have gone through just smooth as grease. There wouldn't have been any problems. But unfortunately, he decided in 2014 to run for lieutenant governor against Dewhurst. And you had four guys in that race, one of them being Dan Patrick. He's the one that ended up winning it. I'm sorry. Yeah, for lieutenant governor. He ended up being lieutenant governor. So Patterson vacated the land office, and George P. Bush ran for it. And so he got in there, and that's what happened there. And then that's when all the problems started. Okay. And all the problems with the plan and not implementing what the legislature intended, and then getting in cahoots with these politically correct revisionist San Antonio people, some of them are really radical. Mm-hmm. They claim the Alamo is just a symbol of the Anglo land grab of Texas. Oh yeah. So that was behind a lot of this. Yes. Yeah. And that's why they wanted the cenotaph out so bad too. And so unfortunately, it devolved into real problems once George P. Bush got in there.
Yeah, the leftists have pretty much identify every symbol of freedom as a symbol of imperialism or of oppression. And it's, like I said, revisionist history is a problem. Is George P. Bush related to the president at all?
Yes, he's his nephew. He is the son of Jeb Bush, who was governor of Florida and ran for president in 2016. That's Jeb's son.
Okay. Alrighty. And I take it he's a Democrat, though, right?
Yeah, he's a Republican in name, yes.
Oh, okay. He's a rhino. Okay. Republican in name.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Where that comes from is it's Republican in name only. So,
yes.
Yeah, because what you did describe is, where the Democratic Party's heading to, which is straight to Marxism at this point. And I know a great many Democrats here, especially here in Kentucky. They're more of John Kennedy Democrats, and they're really being left behind. They're sitting there saying, we don't know what this is, and we don't feel like we're being represented. So I turn around, I just tell them, well, come join the Republican Party, and help us with
that
fight.
I thought y'all had more of them left in Kentucky. Texas, used to be, when I was growing up, it was solid Democrat. Mm-hmm. But it was the old conservative Democrat, like you're talking about. It was a whole different party. And the rural areas, ironically, they were the most heavy Democrat of all. You had a few Republicans in the rich areas of Houston, like River Oaks, Highland Park, and Dallas. Other than that, the state was pretty much Democrat.
Yeah.
But it started changing in the '60s, and then of course when Ronald Reagan got in there, a lot of people, it just started changing more and more. And now it's just the exact opposite. The rural counties are the most solid Republican in the whole state.
Mm-hmm. I believe the people are beginning to wake up to what's going on. It's been 20, 30 years that we've been getting to this point, and now people are starting to rise up and take notice. But the thing is on the other side of the coin, they've kind of gone a little crazy the last couple of years since Mr. Trump took office. Um, they've really shown their hand what they're all about. Um, but what's going on with the Alamo, that transcends even politics, is because what we're trying to do is remember history, and this goes to our love for country and even our heritage.
Yes, that's correct. And as you say, it transcends party. We've got people that have supported us and helped us of both parties, Democrat and Republican.
Right. And yeah, so it really party in this issue, party doesn't matter. It's either you're for us or against us. And hopefully,
Right.
I believe most of the people are before us, you know, because they're wise men that have always said, now I forget who it was, but if you forget history, you're condemned to repeat it. And, we've made a lot of mistakes in the past. A lot of things we'd rather not remember, but if we do forget it, we're going to go right back to it, and we're not going to know enough to fight against it. Okay. As far as, is there a nonprofit that oversees the Alamo, or is it all government authority?
I'm sorry, is there a what?
Is there a nonprofit that oversees the
A
Alamo?
nonprofit. Well, yes, Bush has created a bunch of nonprofits so he could hide the money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually under a government agency, the land office, but he has created multiple nonprofits. Not only the endowment board, which is supposedly to raise private money for this project, but another run the management of the Alamo, just several of them. And he kind of he's going. He's all back on.
Okay. Rick, I'm sorry to tell you this, but my phone is. I should have charged my battery before, but I'm losing battery power and I'm losing you. We're going to have to cut this short. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, let me take a look at this. And there is a nonprofit organization that Rick does belong to. Um, I'll look that up here in a minute, and I'm sure he would really uh, appreciate some donations. And hopefully one moment I will have it. And I'm still looking for it. I had I should have it in my bookmarks. Hmm. Oh, I know where it is. It's over here. Okay. And it should be. Okay. There we go. I'm looking for it. And okay, one moment. Save. Okay, it's the website is Save the Alamo US, and just go ahead and check out the website and for the latest news. And the vote was no 12, yes 2, and one abstention as far as moving the cenotaph. And as you heard, it's a good thing. It's going to stay put, and hopefully, in the near future, they'll get off their butt and start making the necessary repairs to keep the Alamo up and historically accurate, and hopefully, we'll be able to restore it to its former glory. May take a little time, but hopefully, we'll get there. We can always hope. The Alamo is one of America's greatest moments of history, one our greatest show of our bravado and our dedication to this country. Um, the Alamo never did surrender, but the thing is we remember that and we remember it going forward. It's important to remember our history. It's also important to try to avoid war as much as possible. Yes, there are things that we need to be willing to go to war about, freedom and liberty, but that doesn't mean we have to. And we need to really pick and choose our battles. Don't forget to vote. If you're not registered to vote, hurry up and register. Time's running short. And make sure as soon as early voting starts opening up, get to the polls, beat the rush. And if you don't make it before November the 3rd, that's election day, make sure you get into the polls and vote. This is the one of the most important, if not the most important, election to date. Definitely most important election of my lifetime. And it's going to require all of us to get out and cast our vote. This is Daniel Essig, and this is Podcast for Life. Don't forget, next week, okay. Don't forget about us next week, and hopefully we'll. Um, yeah, okay, I know where it's at. I am going through all the brain parts today. Yeah, it is sent. That's right. I sent a reminder. Okay, next week we're going to be talking with Mike Corey, and we're going to teach everybody how to vote here in Knox County, Kentucky. And the polls are getting ready to open in a couple of weeks. And next week we're going to learn how we're going to do it here in Knox County, and how to do it. How you find out how to do that in each state is you email the Secretary of State and request directions, or you can go to your county clerk and ask them. That's probably the best way to do it. Most elections are run by the counties, and the Secretary of State is in charge of overseeing it. And put all the votes together, and then how we're going to find out who our president is. So until next week, take care. Let's love each other. Let's be good to each other. And let's take care of each other. And this is Daniel Essig, and this is Podcast for Life. Thank you.